Thank you and welcome to FCA International's April Safety Call. The purpose of these calls is to provide information and work to create a community of safety professionals in the signatory finishing trades. Welcome Mike Hartnett, our safety professional consultant, to present for us today. Thanks for being with us today, Mike.
No problem, John. Thanks for having me. Today, we're going to be talking about an important topic, mental wellness and suicide prevention in construction. This is something that has a larger impact on construction than it does on most industries. So we'll address that. But first, let's start with the FCA Safety Helpline. Right? That is a service value that FCA provides. If you have any safety-related questions, please reach out either to the phone number 844-414-SAFE or the safety helpline at finishingcontractors.org. That will eventually get to my desk, usually pretty quickly, and I try to respond as soon as I can. All right, so what we're going to be talking about is mental wellness and suicide prevention. It's fitting that we talk about it in April so that we are prepared to celebrate it Mental Health Awareness Month in May. Right, this is a point in time when we want to make sure we bring up these topics to see if we can kind of reduce the impact that these issues have on our area, our industry. We're going to talk about why it specifically impacts construction workers, why they're at risk. We'll talk about some of those stats around suicide. And then we'll answer two serious questions. What can you do personally? And then what can you as a company do, right, as an employer? So we'll touch on both of these topics. So to start off, we have 83% of construction industry workers have experienced some form of moderate to severe mental health issue during their lifetime. Right, I can't say that is surprising to me, having spent 15 years in the trades. There's a lot of people with a lot of issues and not much willingness to talk about it. Right? So construction workers are going to have those higher rates because of two things, right? What their jobs entail and the culture that surrounds them. So the parts of our job, what it's really driving those impacts are high pressure, right? We always have a lot of pressure in the trades. Wages are high, and so are the stakes, right? It's a physically demanding job that also requires long hours. And those long hours are not predictably scheduled, right? Oftentimes did I find that I had overtime right about the same time I was ready to dial it in for a day, right? So that unpredictable scheduling is going to impact it, long commute times, and chronic pain. And then you add to that poor sleep that many of those other issues add in. And you can see why there's a higher risk because of what the jobs entail. But if we look at the culture around it, right, the culture that surrounds it is also really impactful. And about 1 in 6 construction workers would discuss their mental health with a boss or a coworker. That is not a healthy number, right? And a lot of it has to do with that strong silence stereotype. There's a lot of shame around mental health, around mental wellness, as if we aren't all at some point in our life struggling with our mental wellness. The stigma that comes along with it is very impactful. Fear of judgment and the fear of job repercussions, right? These are serious considerations. We add to that a lack of knowledge of how to access mental health help, and we really have a bad formula there. So when mental health services are not used, how do construction workers deal with their mental health struggles? Well, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone that substance abuse issues in construction are high, right? And not just high, but ridiculously high. This is the impact, poor mental wellness, a lack of that dealing with mental health that we have in the construction industry. A lot of those things add together to add to being first in pain reliever abuse, right? First in marijuana use, first in heroin use, and then second for heavy drinking and substance abuse disorders, and third for illicit drug use by industry. Right? These are huge numbers. So they've been shown to have high levels of death in construction as from overdose compared to workers in other occupations. And it's not all that surprising. We look at the physical demands of the jobs and the injuries that can come from them. Doctors are able to provide short-term pain prescriptions, right, for long-term pain problems. Oftentimes, this leaves people going to the street to get those pills the doctors won't prescribe anymore. Unfortunately, with the fentanyl problem we have, that becomes a very risky proposition. So construction workers are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than general industry and manufacturing workers. Right? 3 times more likely. And it's because of what their jobs entail and the culture of the industry. Right? We know that most of us at some point in our careers will have a mental health crisis. Right? We add substance abuse to that and eliminate professional help. That's where we really get those 3 times more likely to commit suicide. Right? So some of those statistics in the US, there was an increase 35% in 2020 when COVID came around. Right? One of the things that we should realize is that 80% of the suicides are males, with only 20% being women. And they're happening very often, right? 45,000 a year, which is 1 every 11 minutes. So last year we talked a little bit about the breakdown of different trade roles. So I made sure that we added the trades that specifically we represent here in the FCA, right? We have a lot of different trades out here that have high levels of suicide, right? But we can see glazers are second there, right after ironworkers, right? That's a pretty surprising number. It's a very high number. And still, painters and floor finishing, we still end up with really high numbers. Okay, this is out of every 100,000 workers. We end up with a big discrepancy depending on what the trade is, right? And that can impact in a lot of different ways. A lot of it has to do with the culture, right? We look at the highest, your glazers, your ironworkers, your masons. These are all very macho jobs, right? We're talking about working at extreme heights for glazers and ironworkers. We're talking about real heavy equipment being used. These end up having higher rates of suicide. Okay, so we already talked a little bit about drug and alcohol use in construction, but we really want to make sure that we're aware of this as a problem, as a mental health problem, and something that people do need help for. Right? And a lot of times we do provide resources to our employees. But the question is, are we offering them at a time when they need to hear it? Right? Because oftentimes it gets, blown off if it's not something that's important to them at that point in time. Right? And then later, when they are in crisis, they don't remember that they have those options out there. Right? And with opioids being used for pain management control, how much they were providing those decades ago versus what they're doing now, which is all short-term solutions. Right? So, and the abuse of opioids really increases that rate of suicide. It really makes it more likely. So, one of the things we need to know about suicide is that there are a lot of resources out there. Department of Labor, Construction Suicide Prevention, and here at FCA on their website. And we'll go a little bit more into that later. So, what can you as a person do? And first of all, you can be aware of those mental illness and substance use disorders, right? You can be aware of what's going on with the people you work with day in and day out, right? That personal connection you make with your coworkers is important, right? And we all know people who are going through adverse life events, right? Such as divorce, serious financial problems, arrest, job loss. We can really exacerbate those problems if we're not paying attention to it. Personally, right now, I'm going through a family issue with my father who's at the end stage of Parkinson's and is dealing with some heart valve replacements. And yesterday, I was not in a condition to go to work. I didn't have the bandwidth for it. I was able to call in sick with a supportive employer who told me, reached out personally and said, hey, if you want to talk about it, I'm here. Right. And we did have a discussion on it and took my apology and said, no need to say sorry. Right. We've all been through things like this. Having those discussions really can impact it. Getting to know the people you are working with and whether or not they have a family history of suicide or mental health or substance abuse disorder can be helpful, right? For gauging where what mental wellness is, right? So having those, being aware of where people are at and being supportive of their need for a little extra sometimes to take care of their mental health can make all the difference in the world, right? It can really be a difference between somebody feeling there's no way out, right? There's nothing they can do. There's nothing but helplessness and guilt or shame or being a burden, right? Well, when we hear things like that, we need to make sure we are there as people, right? Even if we cannot provide that support, we can provide information to help them with where they can get that support, right? If you have somebody with these warning signs, you need to make sure that you help them deal with it, get them the resources they need. Okay. And a lot of times that may be as little as providing that phone number, 988, Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Other warning signs you can look out for is that empty, hopeless, trapped, or have no reason to live, right? That's sad, anxious, agitated, full of rage, unbearable emotional or physical pain, right? We've all seen some level of this in some of our coworkers at some point in time, right? And I've known people that are constantly mad, right, and full of rage. That's not necessarily a warning sign if they're always like that, right? But if we have a change in that behavior, a change in how they're seeing life, then once again, make sure we provide those. Making a plan or researching ways to die, withdrawing, saying goodbye and giving away important items, right? Taking dangerous risks or displaying mood swings, right? Eating or sleeping more or less, using drugs and alcohol more often. All of these are warning signs for suicide. If you do see these items, or you feel somebody is in imminent danger of committing suicide from self-harm, right? Self-harm seems imminent, you should call 911, right? Because that is a crisis. If there's danger of that self-harm seems imminent, right? Somebody's not just talking about what they're thinking, but talking about what they're going to do. We need to make sure we're calling 911. Stay with that person. Contact your HR, contact whoever it is in your company that helps spearhead and take care of these issues. If we don't have somebody in HR, then call ownership. See if they're willing to talk to somebody that they employ to help them get over this issue, right? If you don't have an EAP, emergency action plan, or emergency assistance plan, or HR department, you can also contact that lifeline, right? 1-800-273-TALK, and they can help provide that guidance. But making contact with that employee and providing support and follow up can be the difference between somebody dying or somebody making it through a mental health crisis and getting to the other side. Okay, so that's what we can do personally, but what can you as a company do? Well, first off, I'd say get involved, right? I stated earlier that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, right? So maybe we want to discuss mental health awareness and make sure people understand that they're not alone, right? And it may not reach everybody, but maybe it'll reach somebody that it needs to reach. Also, we can raise the awareness of these issues, right? When we hard hat stickers, such as we see up here, the Construction Alliance for Suicide Prevention, or the one there in the middle, it's okay to ask me for help, right? These normalize asking for help in a community that doesn't believe in asking for help, right? And that's really one of the biggest things you can do is raise that level of awareness. Make sure people know that it's okay to ask for help, that mental health crisis is not something that crazy people have. Okay. We are all a little crazy at some points in our lives, right? And some of us may struggle more than others with mental wellness, but I don't know anybody who I felt has been saying their whole life. Do you? We all need help at some point in time, and we need to make sure that they understand that as well. Over on the bottom left, we have that 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. Uh, you know, that actually came from a specific company. They gave out a bunch of poker chips that have it. And, I have a few in my car that I keep with me in case I see somebody who's having a problem. Right? If I can see it without really knowing the person, then they need immediate help, right? But it could be worth having that discussion. Another option that we have is a bunch of toolbox talks. Last year, we worked with FCA to build some suicide awareness toolbox talks that are now available to you. right? The suicide awareness series talks about prevention, talks about warning signs, mental health stigma. What can you do as a foreman, right? Share some alarming stats. And we even have one on grieving in case the unfortunate situation where you do have a suicide within your workforce. And what do we do to respond to that, right? And some of these toolbox talks can be helpful. And there's focus in May for mental health. There's focus for suicide prevention in September, and there's even a week of construction suicide prevention in September. So talking about those things and bringing up opportunities for people to have those discussions and understand that they are not alone is big, because they may not have come from an environment that let them know that it is okay to have these issues from time to time, and ask for help when they do. And mental wellness is something that has been important to FCA for a long time. If you go to their website, they have mental health resources. You can go back and see years of blogs written on mental health, right? We can continue on deeper and see that there are a lot of resources offered through FCA of where you can find these, the resources you need to correct it, right? So it has information on IUPAT Helping Hand program. If we have a issue that needs to be dealt with immediately, that has to do with a mental health crisis within your workforce, this is one of those areas where you can say, here is a resource you have that you can use, right? Or maybe we can help facilitate them for that, along with many other, whether it's National Suicide Prevention, Canadian or US. And there's a lot of other really good websites here, right? And this is on the FCA website, right? If you go under resources, the drop-down menu, one of them will be mental wellness. Also, the Department of Labor has recently started a PSA on mental health at work. So public service announcement campaign. If you go to dol.gov, general mental health at work, they have a bunch of different resources that are available for you. All right, so what else can you do as a company? Be prepared, right? The HR department should have discussed what they can do in this instance, what they are doing for this. And if we don't have an HR department, then it's up to the leadership of an organization to have these discussions, right? If your district council doesn't have an emergency assistant program for their members, you may consider an emergency assistant program for your employees, right? Because each of you has an organization that has both union members and non-union members in it. That emergency assistant program can help all of your employees, because it's not just people in the field that have mental health crises, right? It's all of us have that possibility. And of course, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. I have it up here a lot because 988 is an important number to know. Right? You can go ahead and reach out to suicidepreventionlifeline.org, and they will provide you with some resources, including hard hat stickers. Right? So this one is a little bit short. No one really likes talking about mental wellness, right? This is not a comfortable topic for anybody, but it's an important topic. It's a challenging discussion that is worth having. So once again, Safety Helpline is a benefit and available to all of you. So please reach out and call safety helpline at finishingcontractors.org or the phone number 844-414-SAFE. And we will provide this presentation in PDF, but there are a lot of different references and resources that we have on this slide so that you can look at it at your leisure if you are looking for that information.
I know in the past we've worked on kind of a employer mental health guide policy plan
Yeah.
a while ago. Have you seen any other companies asking for anything or anything in demand for that? Or are we still not getting to that point yet?
I don't think we're getting to that point yet. I think that I have a lot of clients, including associations, and FCA really is at the forefront of this, right? You guys have asked for mental wellness resources, and I think it really speaks well to your organization that you are. Stay ahead of the curve on this one, right? Because it is hugely impactful.
I mean, FCA has put together we've put together kind of a draft policy plan more for reference informational purposes and whatever resources we could put together. If anybody is interested in seeing anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out to the safety helpline or myself at jlee@finishingcontractors.org, and certainly happy to share. Definitely not a final product yet, but it's pretty good start on things. So if anybody's interested.
And it's challenging to write a policy like that without obligating yourself to everything that's written in that policy, which is part of the reason why we haven't just put a blanket policy out on the website. But John is right. We have worked with you guys to develop that. So if you're interested, please.
I'd be happy to share.